On this day in history, 2000, 7 convicts, dubbed the Texas 7, broke out of a maximum security prison in Kennedy, Texas, setting off a massive 6-week manhunt. If I were ever to face incarceration, I'd be eager to plot an escape as well. I think it's because of my belief that the phrase "sleep tight" originated in prison. Live from Wattpad Nation, it's the Corner Booth, your weekly broadcast where we talk about all things centered around the big orange W. And tonight we have a couple wonderful ladies, and we're going to be joined by another one very soon. And we're going to talk about what happens when you got a bright, shiny, new idea, and how do you take that idea into a story and turn it into a story. And we're going to give you a few ways to do that. Welcome to our 34th episode. We're very, very glad to have you here. I am joined right now by Marian Avalon, as well as Catherine Arlene. I'm sure you've seen them around Wattpad, and we're really excited to kind of give you this very off-the-cuff broadcast tonight. I wanted to give each panelist an opportunity to tell you how they got one of their works in progress or one of their favorite works from idea to story and what happened all the way in between. So that being said, I'm going to let these panelists introduce themselves and tell us what story they're going to be talking about tonight, as well as a brief synopsis, I guess, if you ladies don't mind doing that, just giving us a glimpse. Marian, which story are you going to be highlighting?
So I'm going to be highlighting my personal favourite, No Way in Heaven or Hell, which is the first book of the Afterlife series.
A Wattpad Award winner, correct?
Yeah, that's right, last year. So the idea started from a picture I came across online, and
I do have
I
it.
just saw it.
Hang on. You can keep going. I will show the picture, but all right, the idea did come from...
Yeah.
Hang on.
And I saw it, and it just hit me. That would make a cool story. At first, it was the first idea that came into my head was the love between an angel and a demon. And from there, well, looking at the picture, I sort of thought, what if they had to work together against this big problem, this big threat, which in this case is the destruction of his world, her world, and the world they both originate from, Earth. So, and of course, since they're both from opposite worlds, they don't get along too well to begin with.
No! All right. Well, thank you, Mary. I'm really excited to hear more about this. Catherine, what are you going to be sharing with us tonight?
I'm going to be talking about the process that I'm going through writing my current story, which is The Man Inside the Iron Fence. It is a prequel to my last story, The Boy in the Woods, and it is basically the story of my main character's uncle, who was a rather not very pleasant person, and someone that all of the readers hated. And this is the story of his life from late teens through early adulthood, and the things that happened to him that turned him into the very mean Uncle Jonathan that Jess grew up with. And I'm doing a good job because the readers love him. So I've completely transformed his character, but the problem is that I have to make him now Uncle Jonathan, which is not easy for me to do, to write a character that is sympathetic and then make him less sympathetic. So I feel like
yeah, that sounds like a little bit of a challenge.
It's a big challenge. I feel like I'm telling Anakin Skywalker's story. So
and we all know how well episodes 1, 2, and 3 went, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I definitely took off quite a bit that I'm going to have to deal with here.
Well, I'm excited to hear how you're wrestling with that. It'll be really, really interesting to talk about. But before we dive into that, I'd like to give these panelists a chance to recognize some of their favorite Wattpadders and the portion of the broadcast that we call Cream or Sugar. And basically, if this is one of your first time to ever see one of these broadcasts, Cream or Sugar is either a cream, a relatively unknown Wattpadder who has risen to the surface, or at least the panelist library, or an established Wattpadder. They want to show some love, give them a little sugar. And Marion, who do you got for us tonight?
Me, it's a sugar to a very friendly fellow called James Charles 552, who's from England, like me, I believe. And I came across him because he left this very long but very helpful comment on another story, the Four Elements. And I'm throwing him a little sugar tonight because he actually pointed out something that I had never actually noticed before, which was that, like all stories, there has to be a motive, something that pushes the characters forward in a
Okay.
good way or bad. And for all
Ooh, did we lose her? I got you. Or
I, th- I think we
yeah,
lost
she
her.
dropped out. Dang it. Okay, well, while we get her back, Catherine, let's do your cream or sugar shout out.
Sure, no problem. So my sugar shout out is for oh, maybe she's back.
sorry about that. So I was saying that I had all the motives for the protagonist, but not for the antagonist. So, and he pointed that out to me that you should sort of specify what pushes him to be the way he is. I thought, oh, yeah, I should.
Have he been following you for quite some time, or?
No, we actually came across each other quite recently.
Okay. Well, that's great. I mean,
Yeah, that's the sort of uh, feedback we readers love, isn't it?
absolutely. Catherine, who do you got for us?
My shout out is for C. Rose Kranz, and I met her through a writing group, and she writes Doctor Who fan fiction. And she's a woman who lives in Kentucky, but she's been immersed in the Doctor Who world for decades. And she writes in British English, so it feels very authentic, and which I find amazing that she's able to do that. I have to say that I have read her story Broken, a Time Lord story, and even though I have never watched a full Doctor Who episode, don't hate me.
Nobody's gonna throw anything at you here, you know.
That story was is still one of my very favorite Wattpad stories. I absolutely fell in love with it. It's the story about the Time Lord who goes on a mission to a planet. And if I'm remembering correctly, because I don't know all the characters, I think he was trying to find Rose's kidnapped baby. But anyway, so he's on this mission and he's captured and imprisoned and he's brutally tortured. And there's this girl, a slave girl, who is sent in to take care of him, who is kind of an empathic shapeshifter, and she decides to try to help him escape. And when she does, it goes horribly wrong, and he winds up alone on modern-day planet Earth, not no longer knowing who he is and completely traumatized by what he's gone through. And it was just a fabulous story. It's definitely a mature story. It has mature adult themes, but it was a fantastic read. Kept me up late at night. And she also has another trilogy, a Doctor Who trilogy, which I have not read, but I have read snippets of it while she was writing it, and it's just as well written fabulous. I know there's a lot of Doctor Who fans that must watch the show, and I would definitely,
quite a few Doctor Who fans.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I definitely recommend her stories.
That's great.
That sounds interesting.
We have somebody else joining us. She goes by
Hey, guys.
Deep Fry. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Got the teenagers fed, and they're having a great time downstairs. Yep.
That's great. Awesome. Jessica, just kind of off the cuff right now, do you have anybody that you'd like to give a shout out for Cream or Sugar, just off the top of your head?
Yes, I do. I'd love to give a shout out to Elise Blackpool. And her story it's either Ravens of the Mist or something like that, but she's a fantastic ambassador. That's where I actually got to meet her, and she's a great writer too, and a lot of fun to talk to. And I've just started her story, and actually let me make sure I get the right title here. I should have done this before I signed on.
No, that's okay. I'm glad, this is all improvised tonight.
Raven's Heart, The Isle of the Mists. And it looks like it's going to be a fun story. I've gotten through the first couple chapters and thoroughly enjoyed it. And she's just a lovely person to talk with as well.
You said she was an ambassador?
Yes, she is. She's an ambassador, too.
Yeah, we have a lot of love for those ambassadors. They work really, really, really hard to make sure that Wattpad's an enjoyable place. And Jessica, which story would you like to talk about tonight as far as, what you took from an idea into an actual rigid plot line?
I'm going to be talking about Identity Revealed in the Turah series, the one I've been working on for years and years now.
I think anytime that somebody says, you've been working on it for a prolonged period of time, there's like a love and hate relationship with that work because you really want to get it finished, but man, it causes some problems.
It's true.
Yeah, it's something that we're all having to wrestle with if you're doing something that's epic in size. All right, so I'm going to kick this over to Marion, and honestly, what I'd like to know is just kind of the beginnings of what it took to get that. I mean, you said that you saw a picture, and it kind of catapulted you into, hey, I need to write a story about this. But was there anything inspiration-wise that aided that picture into becoming a story? I mean, I know the exchange rate between words and pictures, but do you find yourself listening to certain music or watching certain movies or reading certain books, things that kind of propelled you forward into making that idea actually realized?
Well, for some scenes, I definitely use music to help sort of get the feeling, to visualize the scene as I would imagine it. Music definitely helps me a lot in my story writing. Part of the inspiration was the global, well, not exactly global warming in itself, but the various degradations that our planet is going through since for the past several decades.
Sounds like a happy story. No. I mean, I think that's great. Is there? What is your stance like in general with? I don't know, the thought of our world coming to an end, I guess. I mean, I don't know exactly how you're trying to explain it, but is there something that you kind of hold as personal that you're trying to? I guess what I'm trying to say is, are you trying to get out a message?
Acceptance, I think, is a lot of the messages. Self-acceptance.
Self-acceptance.
Especially for Kara's character. And I think my own self-acceptance in some ways, because a lot of the book is actually quite autobiographical. There are a lot of elements in it that happen in my real life, which actually quite helped me build a lot of the plot line.
Well, I mean, the only person that, I guess I shouldn't even say that. There's only one person who knows your story, and it's you. So it's really, really cool that you're taking some parallels and putting them into your book. And I'm glad that, it propelled you forward into writing a Wattpad award-winning book, to say the least, which is really awesome. I'm going to scoot over to Catherine. Is there anything in particular that really inspired you into, making what you've made so far happen? There's got to be a certain amount of, tension between the thought of doing what you're doing and actually making it happen. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I would say it was a different experience with this story than with the Boy in the Woods, where I did kind of have to bring together these characters and put them in a world and then kind of let them loose, and then the story just kind of unfolded, where I did kind of have an outline. But while I was writing that story, I had to have a backstory to the adult characters and know what happened that made them do the things that they were doing in the current story, or in The Boy in the Woods. And so I kind of created two stories simultaneously, the story of the past to make what was going on in the present make sense. But then when I got to the end of that story, or close to it, I had a choice. I could either reveal all of the past and basically a summary in The Boy in the Woods, or I could take that story and make it its own separate story. And sometimes I wish that I hadn't, because it's turned out to be a very difficult process for me. I've basically written myself into a corner, and now I have to write myself out of that corner. And part of the problem is that I'm dealing with events that happen at a certain period of time, namely the end of the Great Depression through after World War II, and I have to make the events in my head fit the timeline of history, which I can't mess around with that for the most part. I mean, I can kind of squeak by on a few things, but I really have to make sure that nobody who knows their history reads this and says, "Oh, this is complete bull,"
Yeah, absolutely. That's got to be a different kind of, doubt that's just kind of going to linger throughout the entire writing process as far as the plot points go.
Yes.
I think a lot of, like Forrest Gump and, even newer movies like Days of Future Past, where you're talking about these timelines that are already set in stone, and if you were to change them, then you're, either dealing with a parallel universe, or you're going to lose a lot of your audience because, like you said, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Well, luckily for me, The Boy in the Woods is still on Wattpad, so I have the ability to go back and secretly change things to make them match, because stuff didn't wind up being something I could use. So I do have that. At least The Boy in the Woods is published and set in stone. So that's one thing that is in my favor. And then the other thing that is that I've found to be a tremendous struggle for me personally as an author is that I have a very hard time writing inside a character and making them bad. And Uncle Jonathan is really not a very nice person in The Boy in the Woods. And as I started writing him, I started out with a very cocky teenager who was very full of himself, and as things have happened to him, he's become a lot more sympathetic, and now I have to make him into evil Dr. Jonathan, or Uncle Jonathan, and so I have to make it work, and it's not easy. I wish I could make him a happy and good person at the end, but I don't have that option. So that's the other big thing that I'm really struggling with. But somehow through the miracle of writing, and we all experience this, I just somehow am making ways to tie in the story that I'm working on now, draw parallels from The Boy in the Woods, and it's somehow coming out. So I think by the time I get to the end, I'm going to make it.
That's great. I love it. Thank you, Catherine. Now, Jessica, I just
Yes.
really want to pick your brain about, how you got to from point A to point B as far as ideas, story, and what kind of inspirations we're kind of weighing with the process and the transition.
Well, the first time that I got the idea for the story, I was just a little kid, and I had read The Hobbit for the first time. And it
Yeah.
absolutely inflamed my imagination. I had a couple of favorite characters. I thought Smaug was phenomenal, and I really wanted Gandalf to come and take me on an adventure. He never showed up, but I'm not 50 yet, so holding on hope. And I finished this book, and I decided I wanted to write a story like that. But I knew I wanted it to be a little bit different. I wanted the villains to be more involved, and I wanted the protagonist to be a girl. At that point, I hadn't, actually, as I think back on it, I hadn't read a story where a woman was the protagonist, or even a girl. So I was really excited about that idea. I was a little bit disappointed, excited to find out I was not the first writer to write with a female protagonist, but oh well. And I then started working on that, and Lord of the Rings, of course, informed it, and I wanted it to be this giant epic, and slowly the story started growing, and I was doing world building, and of course I was learning how to write, because I'd never written a novel or anything before, and I just tell my parents, I'm going to be writing a novel, and like, that's nice, darling. And then my dad, actually, I was just a little kid, but he treated me like I was an adult. And see, originally the story was there was a princess, and she had to fight a dragon to save her kingdom. And there were other elements. There was a wizard in there, and there was a red dragon and all these things. And my dad sits down, and he takes a big red pen, and he says, nope, that's stupid. No, that's cliche.
No way, your dad?
My dad did this. My dad is probably the harshest and the best critic I've ever had. And it's like, why is she a princess? She is a princess. She's got to be a princess. And he made me justify every decision. And so that's where the story started growing. And it has grown with me and changed significantly, because that started when I was quite young. It's been over 20 years now. And so, of course, I've worked on other projects, but learning all of these things, and so what it ended up becoming was I started writing the story I always wanted to read. So it had mind readers and shapeshifters, it had a little romance, it had adventure, it had portals, because who doesn't want a portal? I mean, who wants to be stuck on Earth all the time?
Seriously,
let's open it
come
up.
on.
That's right. Yeah, so that's what that's kind of what started with that, and you can see different influences in it. Of course, my love of mythology influenced it, and I still have that red dragon. And I also, Roath is a red dragon. In fact, when I rewrote it, I decided to include a little scene where they come across the Hobbit on Earth. So it's my nod to the original inspiration for the story.
I love that. That's great. Well, thank you, Jessica. I do want to give a quick shout out to all the people that are playing on our live chat right now. Ricky Pond, what's up? Mr. Carl O'Connor's here. Lucy Rhodes as well. Who else we got? Jody. Hello, Miss Jody. And I saw some other people. Atomic Nikki. I'm scrolling through this really, really fast, so if I miss you, I'm sorry. But if you have any questions for this panel, you can leave them in this live chat that we got going on right now. Or if you're watching this as a recording, you can use our hashtag on Twitter, TCBWatt. And, okay, so that's going to scoot over to this next rapid-fire question that I have for you all tonight, which is, I want to know what because I'm sure that you've been faced with this situation, especially as much as the three of you play on Wattpad, what you would say to a struggling writer who is giving you that spiel. I have a great idea, but I do not know how to get it on the page. Is there certain advice that you use for these people? Do you, I don't know, send them a Wikipedia link or a Writing for Dummies book or something? I mean, how would you handle the situation? Marianne, I'm going to start with you. Well, first of all, I should ask you, have you had this circumstance where somebody approaches you and says, how do I write this?
Well, I haven't been asked that, but I have felt I got this idea and I love it, but I don't quite know how to work with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, that is actually a tricky question.
Because you don't want to say the wrong thing, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say write down your idea, then try and think of anything else that might go with it. Basically, write down any idea, any thoughts, names, even a sentence that one of the characters might say that you want to keep. You know, like those memorable quotes that you
Oh
sometimes get.
yeah. So it's kind of
Um,
like one of those spider web diagrams where you have the
yeah,
idea in the
yeah,
center,
something like
and
that.
then you have all these
Something like
tangent
that.
lines. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Something
I
like
get what
that.
you're saying. Is there anything particular that you do? I mean, is that how you navigate through an idea into putting into a plot line? Just
Yeah,
writing
well,
something
basically
down
what I
on a
do
sheet
is
of paper and then writing anything
when I
else
get
that's
an
tangent?
idea, I open the file on my computer. Right, either if I've got the title in mind, I put that down. Otherwise, I write basically A does this, then runs into this, that, or the other. I write the basic idea. Uh, then if I get any other little snippets on the way, I add them underneath. Basically, it's just a jumble of ideas and thoughts anyway. And then I keep them as notes. That way I can go back to them. And sometimes I'll add to them if I've got something planned for later that I don't want to forget, and that's how I work out my storyline usually.
Sounds good to me. Absolutely. I mean, whatever you can do to get the story, started.
Yeah.
So, Catherine, I'm going to scoot over to you. Please help me. I am a writer, and I have an idea, and I do not know how to turn it into a story. What do I do?
Well, people do ask me for writing advice, and I feel absolutely unable to give anybody advice because I'm just kind of winging it. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of instinctively know what's working and what isn't working. So I
Yeah, there is a bit
usually
of that.
will recommend that they find somebody else who knows what they're talking about or
But
read
we
some
all winging
books.
it really.
But I have definitely come in, have had this issue, and what I've done is um, to, as Marianne said, write down the idea, and then start kind of playing with it, trying to come up with, an outline. That's what I did with The Boy in the Woods. I just started with a girl, and then she's in this house, and why is she there? Well, her parents died. Okay, that works. And so kind of go through the process of trying to um, build a world in an outline form, in a summary, and see if that will give me enough to work with, and I have a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's what I do.
And then just fill in the blanks as you go.
Exactly, yeah, because as I write, more things come to me, and the story just gets richer and richer.
Sure. I mean, when you're speaking about, starting with the basic building blocks and then, working your way into it, it's kind of like priming an engine. Um, just taking a little bit of something and, pumping it in just a little bit, piece by piece, and then
Hmm.
off you go. Um, is there, or was there something that you had to do that was totally different? I mean, I know that you said that tackling the sequel, or the
The prequel,
second book
yeah.
of Boy in the Woods, The Man Inside the Iron Fence. I know you said that it presents different problems, but were the solutions, did you find them drastically different, or was it just retooling the same kind of method and then using it over in a kind of a recycled way, or did you try to innovate an idea, or
Well, the issue that I've had with the prequel is that I have I have points in time that are in my head, but I
Mhm.
have no idea how the characters are going to get to that point. So I have to figure that out. Whereas when I was writing the first story, it was more like, I kind of had a vague idea of where I wanted to go, but it just was a lot more natural. And whereas I could knock out a chapter easily in a week or 5 days, really. In the prequel, it's taking me like 2 weeks to get to each chapter. And what I have found that works best for me is handwriting, sitting down with the notebook, write down just where I need to go, and then the ideas start coming, and then slowly the chapter will start to take shape. Um, but then I have to make sure that I'm, get all the parts up to that point. And sometimes it turns out to be more than one chapter because I take longer time to get to that point. But that's basically what I've been doing, and that it's definitely different from what I've ever done before.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of like envisioning, a writer that's, or somebody that's skating further out into a frozen lake, and the further you get into the story, it's like the further you're going out onto this lake, and the more careful you're going to be treading, the further out you go. So it's interesting the way that you're orchestrating this, because you're going backwards in time, but it's a continuation of the first story. Man, I don't know if I could do that. My brain just doesn't work that way. I'd have to do something linear, and yeah, there's just no way. So hats off to you, Catherine. That's amazing.
Thanks.
Jessica, I'm gonna move on over to you. What can you do for these struggling writers that ask that question? What do I do? What advice can you give me? How do I make this something that's in my head and put it onto a piece of paper?
Well, I've gotten this question a lot of times, and I teach creative writing students or tutor them, so this almost always happens. It's like there's this panic that shows up whenever you start thinking about this story, and it's terrifying. And I usually ask questions that try to get them talking about the story idea that they have, and just asking questions. But for those who are really just struggling with, they just don't know where to start, there's an exercise that I found that really can help, which is involves you just go to a place that's quiet, or at least as quiet as you can make it, and you close your eyes and you start thinking about your story. And I tell them just to envision it like a movie playing in your mind. Where does it start? What do you see? And you start getting all of these details from that, and you start imagining it. And usually where you start imagining, just start writing that down after you spend a few minutes. I would say spend 10-15 minutes envisioning the story playing out. Even if it doesn't feel like it's the beginning, you're just starting with, say it's the climax, the big reveal has happened. We now all know that the villain is this horrific chimera that was pretending to be the governor. You now know who it is, and you've got that scene playing in your head. Start writing there, and you start building the story out from that. And that seems to work pretty well, because writer's block oftentimes it's this fear that you're not good enough to write the story, you don't know where to start with it, and starting someplace. The act of writing, as hard as it is, will often destroy writer's block, as you realize you always can revise, and it's okay. Just start getting that story out there and just envision it. So that's probably my biggest piece of advice. The other one is just I keep asking questions. Find someone who will question you and brainstorm with you, and you start writing down all of those things, and you can break it down like, well, what do you think is the instigating act of this story? What brings all of this about? What makes it happen? And then, okay, how do we get there? And you might even start with an outline or something like that.
Oh, that's great. I know that, well, you were talking about, not interrogating, that's the wrong word. Questioning people.
Why interrogate?
Questioning people about your plot and your characters. I know that you have an invaluable person in your husband, but okay, I think that as writers in general, your pets, if you have a pet and you're a writer, your pets know way too much about your story, because if you're anything like I talk to pets like they're people all the time. But I know, Jessica, I know for a fact that Thor and Loki know way too much about your story.
They do.
That's so great. Was there, I guess, with the kind of mapping things out, as Marianne was talking about, and then with, just trying to plot points and then get to them, as Catherine was talking about, and then with you, I guess it's kind of all underlying sequence is the answer here. But Jessica, was there something that you're doing, because I know that you incorporate so much mythology into your story. It's kind of like what Catherine was saying about hopping back in time and having these actual events that did take place on the timeline. Was there a fear or something that kind of resonated inside of you as you were writing it, as far as, I don't know if I could do this, because there are going to be some people that are going to call me out if I make a mistake?
Oh yes, I'm terrified of that. And it happens all the time. My favorite one was being accused of plagiarizing Stan Lee because he created Thor and Loki.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh.
And
I did not know he was the person to credit for that.
I know.
Wow.
I actually came up with quite an intriguing theory of how he got back in time and informed the Norse of their mythology.
If there's one person that could do it, I believe it's Stan Lee.
It would be. It would be. But yes, absolutely. I am absolutely terrified. I actually have a couple of historical novels that I've written that are much more true to it. Like my Ragnarok series is trying to weave all of these world mythologies together and try to say, okay, we got mythologies because they've been passed down through time, and so there's been a deterioration and a breakdown of the myths and the way that our stories often happen. Like if you look at a lot of your classic mythology, you can break down the ages and see how there are different interpretations of the stories. So you can get away with a lot more. You'll still have people who come and they say, oh, no, that's not what happened. Like, it's mythology, honey. Calm down. And when you're dealing with historical fiction, it's much more terrifying because you're dealing with real people, real times, real dates. And with one of these stories in particular, it's called Doris the Vampire's Trial, I intentionally deviate from history and certain facts. And the only way that I could alleviate my conscience with this, because I knew people were going to be upset by what I was doing, and I knew what I was doing specifically, so I wrote a little note about it, and I explained to them that I know that it's not entirely actually accurate, but I have intentionally made changes. So hopefully that covers me. But there are always people who what's the word for it? They nitpick. And yeah, there's absolutely legitimate concerns. And I know it sounds really pathetic, but I still have those fears. I mean, every time I sit down to work on something that deals with objective facts, it's terrifying. I think that's the main reason I like fantasy, because no, it's my world. I say what's true. But here's a handy tip if you do write historical fiction and it's not entirely accurate. There's actually a term for it. You're writing uchronic period fiction, which means that it's set in a general time period that is based more off the mythos of that time period than actual fact. That's what Robin Hood fiction is, that's what King Arthur fiction is, and a lot of others. So when people say, no, that's not accurate, you say, it's a uchronic period setting. It all goes.
Okay, so, all right, I got a thumbs up from Catherine on that one. Just out of curiosity, and this is for all three of you, I'm going to kind of go in a different order with this, but Catherine, I'm going to start with you. How do you deal with those situations when somebody kind of throws the book at you that I'm right, you're wrong, this is stupid, you shouldn't have done it this way, and starts pelting you with all of these, as Marion was saying, nitpicking issues? Is it something you ignore? Is it something that you try to work with? How do you handle the situation?
Well, luckily, nobody's ever been super not pleasant to me about it. But when they have brought up things, luckily those were things that I had thought of before. And so I had a legitimate reason why I didn't include them. Just for one example, somebody said, you know, they shouldn't be saying the word jeans. They should say dungarees. And I said, well, actually, I wrote The Boy in the Woods was a short story first. And when I had beta readers for the short story, because it went into a published anthology, I had used dungarees because I knew that. And everybody was confused, and they said, wait a minute, does that mean overalls? And so I did a Google image search, and sure enough, if you do a Google image search, dungarees comes up as overalls. And so I was like, okay, it's just too confusing for readers. And so I switched to jeans.
See, for me, I thought dungarees was a brand, kind of like Kleenex and facial tissue, you know? I mean, I don't know. I learned something new tonight. That's great. Mary, what do you do when people kind of, you know, attack your work and say this doesn't work or this isn't right? Especially with, I mean, you're playing with concepts of angels and demons. A lot of people have their own preconceptions going into reading it. And they might not be happy if you retool it too much.
But actually, I got I had a bit of a panic attack, and thank you again, Jessica, for putting me out of that. Because I had sort of always assumed that even on even if only in their realm, so to speak, uh, angels and demons sort of had a physical body, and obviously demons, but angels
Mhm.
don't. And I was thinking, I can't. My story doesn't work without them.
Yeah.
So I was
So
like,
what do you tell them? I
okay.
mean, is there a way to kind of, I don't know, practically go about this without seeming like a terrible person? Because I mean, I know a lot of people, their knee-jerk reaction is to really defend their work, and some people get very passionate and
Well,
they'll say
yeah.
something they don't necessarily mean.
Mm. And so what a handful of them, Jessica told me she'd done was she'd taken the idea that we already knew. I think in your case it was vampires, wasn't it, Jess?
It was what I had done. It was with the mythical gods in Ragnarok series, and I called them Osvars instead of calling them gods to try
Ah,
and
alright.
diffuse the situation.
Mm, yeah. Well, and so instead of calling them angels, there are some things that look a bit like angels but aren't. They're, they're the essence of the person. They're basically the reflection of the person that they really were, in a way.
Oh,
That
that's
if a person was shy and but very, I don't know, very creative, the the essence would be very creative as well.
sure. I
And
mean,
they call, so I gave them a new name, and then hopefully that works. I'm
it,
like
seems,
keeping it
it
better
seems
than
like, I mean, you kind of approach the problem at a very micro level, I guess, and then just do what you can, and hopefully it'll work in the long run without moving around too much. I think that's a really,
yeah.
really good tactic. Start small, and hopefully it'll affect the bigger picture in a better way. I do want to say, hey, what's up to some of these new people that I kind of missed or either, uh, joined in halfway through. Millie Eckert's there. Camille, hello, Camille. We also got I May. She's joining the
Yeah.
conversation. James Wright, what's up? Everybody seems to be having some a pretty good time with these live chats. I'm glad you guys are all connecting through this. That's the goal, is to make some connections and hopefully find some new, strategies in writing. That's the ultimate goal here. But just kind of skipping over this really, really quick. Carl O'Connor, he's talking about the fact that there was one time he had 2 pet rats, and he called them Rat 1 and Rat 2 because he couldn't tell them apart. That's awesome, man. I think I'm gonna, name my future children that. Lucy, no, I am not drinking engine coolant. It is Kool-Aid. So yeah. Let's see. And then I also just kind of scrolled down from the top. And yes, I did make a mistake. I did not count right. We are on episode 35, not episode 34. So thanks for calling me out on that one. Getting back to the conversation on hand, Jessica, is there something specific that you do when somebody's really, just taking it out on you?
I've had that happen many times, and I've actually developed a little bit of a system. I used to go through it and read it and analyze it and, oh my goodness, is this true, is it not, and trying to break it down and understand it and see, it basically going almost to the extreme. It goes almost to the extreme of taking what everyone says, because then you wind up carrying the donkey instead of the donkey carrying you. And nobody wants to do that. But now what I do is I look at who's telling it to me. And I had this one person I talked about who sent me maxed out all of the characters, listing all of the flaws in Tura. I mean, but they were...
No way!
Yes, it was 5 pages, and he was just nitpicking, and they were things like, well, a dragon couldn't say this word, and I'm like, but you have no problem with the fact that it's a man who shapeshifted into a dragon. And so I look at what are they saying, but also who's saying it.
Sure.
And when someone starts going off the crazy train like that, I don't have time to go along, and I just delete it now or move on. But I have individuals who I do trust, and they're brutal with me. My dad still has no problem. He'll go through my story. Seen that. Oh, no.
That's amazing that this kind of relationship dynamic has gone through into adulthood.
It has. He is. And then I
get connection with my dad.
Yeah, it was so funny. I told him when Eragon came out, I said, Dad, he said, I can't believe you didn't let me publish that story. I had it done before Christopher Paolini. And he said, it was still not well done. But, now, when there is one thing that I do differently, though, when the person is offended, is the only way I know how to describe it. I had one person who contacted me who told me that she was incredibly offended by what I had done to her nation's mythology. And so I actually talked to her a little bit more, and I explained what I was doing, and I had the unfortunate privilege of informing her that I'm not the first person to rewrite mythology. Apparently she didn't realize that was happening. Then I later found out that she was trolling me. So compassion can sometimes get you. But when people just start nitpicking for more, just you think that they're throwing out things, you only have a limited amount of time. Get people who you trust, who you know will go into your story, and they're not going to leave it until they've examined everything. And when they tell you it's good, they can tell you specifically what's good, and they can tell you specifically what needs to be improved. So, because eventually you're going to get to the point where you get people who are just, wasting all your time, and you don't have time for that.
Yeah, exactly. All the time that you invest into reading just garbage critiques, that was time that you could have spent writing or doing something else, or actually reading critiques that do matter from people that you do care about. I mean, that's definitely a valid point. Oh, man, I cannot believe it's 10 minutes till we close out this 35th broadcast, yes. I do want to give everybody on the panel a chance to share their Pass the Salt for the week. If you've never, ever seen Pass the Salt on a broadcast, it's basically an honest observation, opinion, quote, or factoid in 140 characters or less. It's just a little way to add flavor to these broadcasts. And after sharing them here, the panel will share them on Twitter. Hopefully you can give them some favorites and some retweets. I know that they love that. Marion, what do you got for Pass the Salt?
Mine is, if your fingers are itching to write, don't deny them. Write, write, write.
I like it. Thank you, Marion. Catherine.
Mine is, excuse me, don't get discouraged if a story is difficult to write. Great authors are the ones who don't give up.
I love that. That's great. Thank you, Catherine.
Yes.
Jessica.
Well, this is very personal to me because I've been having to make this decision as well. And I came up with, when deciding whether to publish traditionally or independently, make sure you know your goals with the project. Be honest. You don't have to impress anyone. Just do what's right for that story.
That's great. I love it. Thank you, panelists. And now we're just going to wrap this up. It's the end of our broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. This is just what we call Check Plays. I do want to give a little bit of time to a couple of groups. One is the Wattpad. They do a Twitter chat every single week. I have a list that they actually posted on Twitter, and they broke down this entire month, which is great. And this week they are discussing how to edit your manuscript. Jessica, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, we're going to be talking about how to edit your manuscript and how to do it without losing your mind. It's not going to be about how to do it so that you don't need an editor.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, because you can go insane editing a manuscript. This isn't to replace, say, a professional editor or something like that, but it's to put your work in better condition and to help you be better poised to, say, get an agent or a publisher, something like that.
That's great. And you do stay on for an hour on Tuesdays at 8, correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. So please join them. I mean, that hour goes by super fast. You get to meet a lot of really, really cool Wattpadders and just writers, readers, everyone alike, and really, really great group. 24 hours before that, on Monday or tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Wattpad 4 does a Twitter chat, and you don't want to miss that one either. There's like a ton of Wattpadders that get together for that one. I'm not exactly sure what they're talking about this week, but they always make it entertaining, and it's definitely not something to miss. Right after this broadcast, in about 8 minutes, the Word Nerds will be going up, and they're a YouTube broadcast just like this one. It's a phenomenally talented group of women that really love writing, publishing, everything that has to do with the process. I highly encourage you to catch one of those chats if you haven't already. I do want to kind of pick the brain of Miss Catherine Arlene on this thing that a lot of people know as ambassadors on Wattpad. And I just kind of want to ask Catherine, can you give me a blanket statement on what these ambassadors do, why they're around?
Sure. The ambassadors are basically, well, first of all, they are just regular users like everybody else who volunteer their time to working for Wattpad. And they are basically the go-between between users and the corporation. And there are three main groups for the ambassadors: engagement, and these would be people who run the ambassador Twitter feed, the ambassador Facebook page, the ambassador profile, answer questions. They get a lot of private messages on that profile, people needing help. And then another team is the community team, which is one of the ones that I'm on. This would be the club moderators. So we're the ones who are in the clubs, making sure people are following the rules and helping people, because a lot of times people will post questions and something isn't working right, they need help. And then the last group is content, which I also happen to be a member of that group. And these are ambassadors who go to the hot lists and the undiscovered lists and make sure that the stories that are posted in there are the correct genre and the correct language that they should be for that list. And one of the big things about Wattpad is that it's constantly growing, especially worldwide. And so the ambassadors are a huge help, especially ones that can speak multiple languages. And so when I started, I think there were about 50 ambassadors, and now there are, I think, around 110, 120 ambassadors. Mm. And we will probably add another maybe 30 to 50 ambassadors January 1st. We add a new group of ambassadors every 3 months. And if anybody is interested in becoming an ambassador, probably around February, but for sure March, if you go to the ambassadors at ambassadors profile, you will find a link to a forum where you can actually apply to become an ambassador. And so one of the great things about being an ambassador for me personally is that I get to help people every single day. Mm. And I get to help make the community a better place, and I love that. I just absolutely love it. But we also get to try out beta programs early, provide feedback to the company about whether they're working or not. And so that's another thing that I really enjoy being able to do, is to give my perspective as an author, as a reader to the company, because they all use the platform, but they come to it as a job rather than as an author. Mm-hmm. And so this is where we can help them see how, from our perspective, how things work.
And that's wonderful. That a company will actually say, "Help us, help you," kind of deal, and where your opinions actually matter. If you are wondering whether or not somebody on Wattpad is an ambassador, just go to their profile page and you'll see a nice little badge. It's usually blue. I believe that's what they're using now, and it will definitely say, "Hey, this person is an ambassador," and you can ask them questions to and fro, and it doesn't matter. I mean, these people they definitely know their stuff, and even if they don't have an answer for you right away, they will point you in the direction of somebody who does. One of my favorites, of course, I mean, Catherine Arlene, she's amazing. Yeah, she's one of the best. Gavin Wilson, if you ever have a question, he's been on a panel before with the Corner Booth. He's incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to all things Wattpad, and he's a shining example of what it is to be an ambassador. And we thank all the ambassadors out there because, you know, you're the reason why this site works as well as it does.
I should say that that Gav, the orangutan, was an ambassador, but he's actually now the ambassador's boss. So he's my boss.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah.
That's great, and he is at the orangutan. If you haven't come across Gavin Wilson, he's truly a delight. And I can't wait. Someday, Gavin, if you're watching this broadcast, we are definitely going to get a beer sometime. I'm very, very much looking forward to that. I do want to remind everyone to check out Wattpad's Just Write It Challenge. 10,000 words, 30 days, you can do it. They have a bunch of different excerpts that are all available on one nice little story. I believe it's called #JustWriteIt on the Wattpad page, and it'll give you 30 days of lots of pearls of wisdom, lots of advice, lots of encouragement, and we hope that you find it helpful. And with that said, we are done for the evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Yeah. Absolutely, man.
This month, as it's Christmas, they are adding the theme for this month's 10,000 words Just Write It challenge is #Holiday Chaos. And I'm actually doing one this month.
Holiday Chaos. Yeah, that sounds fairly intriguing. So check it out.
You can have fun with that.
Yeah, it's on the community toolbars. If you go into Wattpad, it's very, very simple to find. We will be back, same time, same great channel next week. If you haven't already, please subscribe. You'll be the first ones to find out when we're launching broadcasts and all the information that has to do with them. Ladies, if you'd please say goodnight.
Good
night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.